Good afternoon. I'm your host, Don Burgess, here on Bermuda's News and Views. And with me today, I have the Mayor of Hamilton, Charles Gosling. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you, Don.
And Patrick Cooper. I don't know your official title, but he's in charge of engineering and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Don.
It's a bit of a rainy afternoon, but it's always sunshine in our hearts, and we're glad to have you guys here. May 24th is in 2 days. The city yesterday put out sort of a notice about cleanup and things. I noticed this year that it seemed like people were marking the sidewalks earlier and earlier with names, and actually I've seen one spot where a name's come up, another name's gone down, a third name's gone down in the same spot. What are some issues with May 24th with the city?
Well, it's a community event, and I think we need to ask the community to sort of be mindful of the other members. We're all there to have fun, to have a great time. People have been asking us whether or not we wish to license or to have permits for the streets, and to some extent, I think that will be taking away from part of the experience of May 24th. I'm not really sure that we wish to go down that route, but we'll certainly be talking to Cultural Affairs on this matter. It is, while we assist them and coordinate a lot of stuff with this government ministry, it is basically their party which they hold on behalf of the entire island. So we'll see if they wish to go along this particular route. But we also have no power of enforcement. So you can put down your name, or we could have a permit system. We could implement that tomorrow. But we'd have no power to enforce it at all. And we would end up calling the police, and I'm sure the police have more things to do than to settle sort of rights of somebody to be able to have their square footage of the sidewalk during that weekend.
Now, the cleanup issues, has that been a problem in the past?
Our crew is pretty damn good.
Yeah, it can be. What we've historically found is when May 24th is on a weekend or the next day is not a working day, the parties seem to last a little bit longer, the festivities seem a little bit brighter. So we can get quite a bit of trash buildup. The majority of people look after their spaces and clean up their spaces, but there are one or two that could do a better job at helping us get the city back in order, ready for the next day of business.
Now, one of the big things that's happened this week in town is the moving of the Belco generators, and I was really fascinated, Patrick, just to watch it and just, all the pre-planning that went in advance, because, I saw traffic lights come out and temporary traffic lights put in, stop signs moved, temporary, the curves built up. Mm-hmm. From a planning point of view, how long in advance were you guys working on this, and what sort of things happened to make this a smooth transition?
Yeah, so we've been working with Belco and their contractor, BWSC, probably 6 months, quite a ways out. Belco approached us and said, we're building the North Power Station, we need to get our new engines and generators in, we're going to need to come through the city, and we started the conversation of how that was to happen. We worked with Belco quite a bit on pre-planning the route and trying to get the route so that it impacted the city the least. Initially, Belco had said we'd like to go along Church Street all the way to Cedar Avenue and right down Cedar Avenue all the way out to St. John's Road. And that would have impacted about 15 to 20 street trees. They're quite mature on Cedar Avenue that have a lovely canopy. And we would have had to remove all the canopy, and a lot of limbs and a few trees would have had to been removed completely to get the engines to fit down the road. So we worked with them and we tried a few alternate routes, and their transportation specialist has got all the lovely satellite photography and mapping, and they can superimpose how the machine would work and how much room they needed, and we were able to end up with the route that we did, and we only ended up impacting one tree, which I think was a good win for the city, as well as allowing Belco to have this route, which The alternate route which we've used in the past was along Parleville Road and straight down Woodlands Road. But there was a lot of overhead services on Woodlands Road that it wouldn't fit under. And the amount of effort that it would have taken to drop all that overhead sort of just made it easier, or made the decision easier, that we needed to go an alternate route.
I was curious about that because it seemed like the straight line would have been the easiest way, but then the other considerations with the trees, because I saw it come down by Victoria Park on the other side, and then around Mount St. Agnes, and then back out on Cedar Avenue.
Yeah.
So as far as starting moving things, how long in advance did you guys have to start taking out signal lights and doing up the curves?
We were probably a week out, a week before they arrived. I believe the boat arrived on the 10th of May. So the week before and that weekend before it arrived, we were doing the asphalts to ramp the curbs so the crawler bogie could maneuver up and over the curbs to make those corners. It wasn't too bad. I mean, what's been difficult for us is the loss of parking. Obviously, we've blocked off a lot of parking, especially cycle parking, both at City Hall and at Number 1 Dock, which has really inconvenienced a lot of people who depend on the bike parking spots.
Right. I had trouble parking this morning. I was expecting with the rain it'd be a little bit easier, but so when do you expect everything to sort of return to normal?
So we have 2 more nights of transportation, 2 more generators to run, so tonight and Thursday night, and they're going to clean up Number 1 and hand it back over to us for Friday morning, May 24th. It'll be all clear. Okay,
and the built-up street corners, will they return to normal? Do they have to be taken out?
Yep, they will all be taken out during the next week. And all the signposts put back up, and the traffic islands replanted. Yes.
The mayor election, the city had their election this week, and you were re-elected unopposed. And actually, I think there was only
there's only one seat under contestant. Yeah.
Yes. Pretty much everything stayed the same. Do you see that as a reflection of you're doing a good job? Or is that more a reflection or some combination of two, that the municipalities reform sort of deterred people from wanting to run with the uncertain future?
I would, Aretha Franklin's father was a great minister, and he has a quote which I love, which is, "Surely if you anticipate failure, you will fail." So I will take this as being very much a big pat on the back from every single person on the island who could have run, that they decided that they wouldn't because they were satisfied with the job that myself and the other council members were doing. So I would say that was a big, huge tick. Right. I know other people are going to take it differently, but if I don't take that positive route.
Yeah. Now, the city standpoint, the government can't bring up reform again for another year because it was defeated in the Senate. Are there talks going on with government as ahead of that, trying to deter it or reshape it?
The Bermuda rumor mill continues. There are many ways to skin this cat, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if something else were to come up very, very soon. We are continuing with our court case, which is to do with the constitutionality of not only the recent bill, but also of the number of acts that have been passed through Parliament since 2009. We have absolutely nothing at all to fight against the ability of the residents as well as the ratepayers to vote. But for some reason, when the business ratepayer and those people that leased property to Bermuda businesses were given the vote back, that for some reason the property owners that had residency units within the city, they did not get their vote returned to them.
That seems blatantly unfair.
It's very much unfair, and particularly when a lot of those property owners actually own property in northeast Hamilton, which is an area that government has identified for future development to bring in high-rise accommodations for the increase in the Bermuda population numbers.
Right. Well, I mean, I liked what the government did because they had some forethought, and at least in that response, you want less traffic in the city. You allow a designated area for high rises and people to live in the city, and then they're walking to work rather than driving.
Yeah, there are lots of challenges in northeast Hamilton. One is that most of Hamilton has actually been flattened one way or the other through the various developments that have happened over the years. So you also have, you can see in northeast Hamilton where you still have pretty huge hills back there, and a lot of the lots are actually on significantly smaller sized lots than elsewhere within the city. So there's got to be a process by which you can get property owners to come in together and form some kind of a co-op development scheme. There are lots of ways to work with it, and it'd be nice for us to have the opportunity to be able to work with government to get this thing going properly. You want whatever is going to come out in terms of residential units, something that anybody is going to want to live in. You don't want it to end up being an area where it is where it's just for working class or exclusively expat or whatever. You want to be able to bring in all sorts of different people and have an interesting community that everybody wants to be a part of.
Yeah, I know, I've seen on social media, there are some concerns about gentrification of the area, losing the unique culture that Northeast Hamilton has. How do we go about making sure that's preserved going ahead? That's
a huge challenge because in some respects gentrification actually comes about when you're doing it right. That obviously people want to move in. It's a limited area, therefore prices are going to be increasing and all that stuff. You really want to ensure that when you do these improvements, that you don't get in the investor who is there for just the pure reason of making more money off this. That you want to have it as those people that are seeing the improvements in the area are those people that have actually had to put up with it when the standard of service or the standard of the community hasn't been to the level of what they should be able to have expected.
Yeah, because I'm sure that would be a complaint, we've got these new residents, all of a sudden we're getting new services. Why weren't we getting the services beforehand? That's one way of looking at it. I guess in some respects you have numbers and always playing a game. A reason for overhead power cables for a lot of reasons is because there's nobody within that area that is willing to have a vault on their property which is able to handle the distribution of the power throughout that neighborhood. If you don't have that, and a lot of times that will not, the undergrounding of cable won't happen. A lot of the properties elsewhere within the city where there are no power cables to be seen, I can guarantee you some of those businesses have a large portion of their basement being dedicated to Belco and their power vaults to distribute the power elsewhere. So if you're not getting buildings being built, or you're not having somebody who's going to be generous with a part of their property with Belco, a lot of that stuff doesn't happen. But hopefully the people will be seeing is, wow, we're having progress. Things that I've been wanting for, things that I've been striving for are actually now being achieved. And sort of going the positive route rather than the other way. Yeah. Speaking of buildings being built or unbuilt, what's the progress or status with the Canadian Hotel? It's been cordoned off. We've lost some sidewalk there as well.
Yes, so the developer is working there. I believe they're doing asbestos abatement there, and once they're finished the abatement, the rest of the old properties, there were 7 or 8 buildings on that property. The remaining buildings will be demolished.
We have any sort of timeline as when we might see the sidewalk return and people be able to use it rather than have to walk by the barricades on the street?
Our hope is to get the sidewalk reinstated once it's safe to do so, once the buildings are demolished. The sidewalk was blocked off for safety reasons. The buildings there were not in good shape. We didn't anticipate that they would fall into the road, but it's better to have an abundance of caution and to make sure the public is safe.
The city's got, besides the Canadian Hotel, the building that burnt down on Front Street a few years back. Over on Reed Street, we've got the big hole that's next to the travel agency that's in the building that's cordoned off. Is that a lack of progress on some of these things a sign of our economy, or what can the city do to sort of help spur interest and get not that you're in the business of promoting other people's businesses, but you want people to move in and have attract people to spend money here and keep the city active and vibrant?
Well, we're going into a strategic planning process on Monday for a couple of days, and that's one of the issues that I want to raise up of what can we do. We essentially have the city rates, which are a proportion of what anybody would pay in terms of land tax elsewhere on the island. And want to see if maybe there's something that can be done with that in terms of doing a forgiveness for the first 6 months or maybe even the first year of new businesses coming in and establishing themselves.
Rather than somebody moving from one office to...
Exactly, yeah. And so to see what we can do there. Unfortunately, I think with some of the empty buildings around, there's a little bit of which historically has been true, but not necessarily over the last 10 years. If I purchase this property, I can let anything happen to it, because I know ultimately when I want to sell or when I need to sell, I'm going to get more for it tomorrow than I did when I purchased it. Just because the price of property is just, as I said, up until 10 years ago has just increased virtually year after year. Maybe a couple of up or down turns here and there, but so that's really been a safe bet. The problem is that it devalues all the properties around, and I would like us to sort of have a review of some of the derelict properties within the city. It is within our rights to actually have those properties torn down and the property made good at the expense of the landowner. I would really prefer something like this to be more government driven than city driven, but there is that possibility, because I don't think it's right for a neighborhood for somebody just to be doing their investments that particular way. I don't think it's right for somebody to just sit on a vacant area, having an absolutely outrageous selling price, and just waiting for that ultimate day to arrive when somebody is going to choke and actually pay for it. And then there's the economy.
The waterfront always seems to be an issue as to, people have long said, we want to make the waterfront more beautiful. Now, I remember when John Swan back in the 90s was sort of advocating for it, and, we've had not any real progress. What would your vision of the waterfront be, and when would you like to see, in a realistic term, happen?
I would like the waterfront to be developed piecemeal rather than there just be one mega structure being done. I think that is the best way to ensure that it would be proportionate to the island and to the needs of the island. I would like to get some clarity from government on whether or not Hamilton is going to be a destination point for cruise ships. We have not had a dedicated contract cruise ship into Hamilton since the Veen Dam. It's always been held out as a carrot of something that we might expect, but nothing really has come of it. And
But isn't that more the tourism authority's responsibility now at this point?
No, because the only person that can actually authorize the visitations of cruise ships is with Marine and Ports. And it's something which is completely, totally out of our power. All I've said to the last 4 or 5 ministers that the municipalities have fallen under is if you actually wanted to do an economic program for Bermuda, which would have an immediate positive impact, that would be to get a contract cruise ship back into the city. You walk along some of the streets and with some of the empty retail units that are about, and the general condition of retail in Bermuda. They have their challenges with the internet and all that, and the increases in government duties and various costs everywhere. They have those challenges, but also you've got a declining number. And it's not only the 5,000 to 10,000 that we lost in terms of work permits, it's the hundreds of thousands of visitors that moved from being hotel visitors to cruise ship visitors. Cruise ships are great. They play their role within the community. They give you numbers. They give you a boisterous environment whenever the ship was in town. You walk out onto the street and boy, something's happening. They might not have the deeper pockets that the people in the hotels do, but they're still there and they are still buying something. But you flip that mix of the hotel visitors and the cruise ship visitors. You flip it as we've experienced right now, and that's had a huge impact on retail and its viability. Get another ship and get a ship, or even better, get 2 ships coming into the city on a weekly basis, and it would be night and day the change that would happen.
I know a lot of people have the thought that cruise ships passengers don't spend as much money, but they're still spending money. I know
they're still spending.
I know my wife used to be the manager at Aswood Dickinson, and this was '98. And one day I went to pick her up from work, and I saw on the safe they had all the cruise ships that were listed. At that time, there were 4. And over the course of the cruise ship season, they spent $2.6 million at Aswood Dickinson. That's just one store. So you add that to all the rest of the city. I'm sure like everybody would be happy to have feet on the ground.
Very much so, and if you look at the way that the cruise ships are these days, it's not everybody is coming on the inner cabin of the ship, for $5, and then you get charged for every single drink and whatever after that. There are a lot of suites on the cruise ship stuff. There's a huge mix of the individuals that are coming on board, and obviously we're not getting the hotels being built, nor the air traffic to suddenly redevelop the hotel industry the way it was back in the 70s and 80s. But there certainly is still plenty of room for cruise ships.
Right. One of the issues that always keeps coming up, people talk about, is pedestrianization of Reed Street. Now we've got the little bays, or sort of, where people can sit and relax, and places for Ashley's Lemonade set up at the corner of there at Reed and Burnaby. Are we going to see more of this, or are we going to see eventually Reed Street pedestrianized? Is this just a step towards it, or would you like to see other parts of the city like that portion of Reed Street?
Well, I think the aim of the city is to slowly improve the pedestrian product there on Reed Street. A lot of people have different ideas of what they see as pedestrianization. We cannot turn, or the city cannot turn Reed Street into a complete pedestrian precinct where there's no traffic. The way in which Hamilton is developed is that all the stores are all front facing. There's no back of house. Everything that goes into that store gets delivered on Reed Street and gets taken into the store. So if you go to a New York, a London, and you go down a street which is just all pedestrian, they've all got back of house where they can load and service the buildings from behind the buildings, so you can have this lovely walkway in front. We don't have that luxury here. So we've got to come up with a different solution where we've got to accommodate traffic, because they do need to load the buildings up with supplies and service them, and we do want pedestrians to use it. So we're going to have to create some sort of a shared space, and it's not going to be all one or the other.
So I guess like the flip side of that, and some people really like the fact that it seems more casual, they can stay and relax a bit. But then, people complain about the loss of parking spaces or the loss of bike spaces. How do you balance the two?
Very difficult.
One of the ways that you answer is, I think, is by doing what we're doing right now. Is that we are taking away some of the parking areas, where we are introducing seating there, spots for outdoor vendors, trying to encourage people to enjoy Reed Street as an entire environment, rather than just being a destination for particular shops. We're in the process right now of working with the Bermuda Police Service, and we're hoping to get additional policing in Hamilton to address some of the antisocial behavior which goes along. Unfortunately, when you introduce some of the nicer bits of ambience for the area. But people complain about, I don't have anywhere to park. Well, guess what? If we went the entire way, there's a lot of pressure from other interest groups in terms of pedestrianization within the city, you wouldn't have anything at all. So at least it might be a pain for some people, but hopefully they're going to be able to, both sides are going to be able to look at this and see, are we actually addressing what we're hoping to address? And I would rather go through this slow process of educating the public through their experiencing what's happening there, rather than for us to say, right, it's every cool city out there has a pedestrian area. We've decided we're going to pedestrianize this thing and live with it. We feel that the community should have much more of an impact in that.
Well, I think, again, you have conspiracy theorists or people who complain that you're taking away these spots to force them into the paid parking at City Hall or one of the other paid lots. How would you respond to that?
No.
They're both paid spaces.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
And in fact, you should be paying more on the street than you are on the car park. So if anything, we're doing them a favor.
Yeah, you're making them walk too.
Given the amount of diabetes and other issues like that through lack of exercise, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I noticed there's a few corners now that are being expanded. Is this mainly a disabled or handicapped issue that you're trying to make it easier for people with disabilities to be able to get from corner to corner?
It's twofold, actually. The primary driver is safety. So the larger sidewalks or the bump outs on the sidewalk, what they allow for is motorists, when they come to the stop line, they have visibility of the other legs of traffic. So they can see where the other vehicles are. So it makes it much safer. It also brings the pedestrians out from behind the parked cars to the edge of the sidewalk so they can be seen. So it's a pedestrian safety. It also helps with congestion because we can cycle the traffic lights much faster, because now the pedestrians actually travel in the road a much shorter distance because the sidewalks are closer together. They're in the road for less time. Therefore, we don't need as much time on the red light to get the pedestrians across the road, so we can speed up that cycle and get more vehicles through an intersection. So it helps with congestion as well. One of the other things we're benefiting with is the standardization of the junctions, so that someone that's visually disabled can navigate every single intersection knowing where all the street furniture will be. With the tactile paving, when I come across the tactile paving, this means that the controller is going to be here on my left-hand side. I know where to find it. All our other intersections were organically installed in the 80s when we first put traffic lights in. Standards have increased, and we're just doing best practice now, trying to make sure the intersections are safe for everybody.
Right, and when you say tactile paving, you mean those little round dots?
Yes.
So some people may not be familiar that they're there to help people to get across the street.
They're there for the visually disabled, so they're taught how to navigate these junctions. So when they come across, because the tactile paving you'll see is an L-shaped on all the intersections, and it goes right back up to a boundary. So the disabled person, when they're traversing the sidewalk, will come across it and they'll know, there's a pedestrian crossing here. And it will direct them to where the face of the road is.
Yeah, it's also when the sidewalk is being widened, and in a lot of the cases it's actually been you're not taking up any of the moving traffic area. You're actually taking up some of the area which should not be used for parking. Every intersection you have the double yellow line. But in a lot of cases where you will have somebody who will take that advantageously to stick their vehicle for a while, not realizing that they're completely destroying sight lines for either other traffic entering into the intersection or for pedestrians. I have a lovely case almost on a daily basis in the corner of Brunswick and Dundonald, where one of the local courier companies insists on, when the guy's doing a delivery in the neighborhood, parking right on the intersection. And there's and in fact, even parking over one of the pedestrian crossings there. So not only he just completely, totally destroys the sightlines for everyone. It's not just the courier companies. There are so many people who, I'm only doing it for a moment. Don't worry about it. Well, accidents normally take place in just that moment.
I think part of the thing too is, I know some people have complained that, by bumping out the corners, you've taken away a turning lane in some spots in the city, and they feel like that impedes the flow of traffic. What analysis or research have you guys done to show us what that impact would be?
So on every single intersection, we do a design brief. We did traffic counts to start with. So you start with the data of how many vehicles are doing what maneuvers, and you work up from there and go, what's acceptable for congestion, and how busy is the intersection. And we've determined with the intersections what's acceptable and what are acceptable levels. So sometimes, yes, we've taken out turning lanes, and in other places we'll be installing turning lanes, such as Cedar Avenue, where we're in the process of widening Cedar Avenue to allow 2 proper full lanes coming southbound.
Okay.
Because right now you've got 1.5 lanes, and depends who gets there first gets to occupy the turning lane. It's substandard. We can't. It's just not good enough to have that. And in a lot of cases where we've removed the turning lane, there wasn't enough width to properly have two lanes. They kind of organically grew there back in the 80s when cars were smaller, trucks were smaller. But now with the larger vehicles, they're just substandard, and we can't have them.
I would have to say one of my big disappointments in driving in the city was when they, on King Street, where you came up to the stop sign at the fire station, where they made people who were parking there, wisdom of Solomon, after 4 o'clock, you weren't allowed to park there anymore, and that way you created 2 lanes for people to get down. It seemed like the traffic flowed a bit better, but now with the cars parked there, the line seems to back up a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah, how would you answer that one?
Yes, this is, we've had a lot of discussion in-house about this intersection. It's one of the mayor's, I'll call it pet projects, or pet peeves.
Yeah, okay.
The mayor, quite frankly, he liked the fact that there were 2 lanes there. I pushed for, based on our traffic consultant's recommendation, to narrow it down to just 1 lane at King Street, because it's a dangerous maneuver coming off of that stop line and crossing over a full lane of traffic to get to that far right-hand lane, when the correct maneuver is to go into the left-hand lane and merge further down the road, and it's a much safer maneuver.
So I have accepted the argument, because it is an argument where they've gone to road traffic engineers to get that decision being made, and I have asked for a sign to be put up to explain that to the people, because not everybody realizes that the intent is to go further on down and then to do the merging process. I wait patiently.
Patiently, good.
Yeah, because I always liked using the left lane, because I'm not going out to the East Broadway. But now sometimes I'm stuck up the block quite a bit of ways, and I see all those cars parked on the side, and I'm going,
Yeah.
slowing my escape from work in the evening. I guess one of the things I did like that happened was the turning lane there at the Court Street and Reed Street that you put in where the Canadian Hotel. That seemed to improve traffic.
Yeah.
So you'd done research and decided.
This is something which is very, very carefully done. It's not done over a coffee at a coffee break in the morning, or even worse, a dark and stormy at happy hour somewhere. A lot of time and effort and intellectual expertise goes into this. We engage a company in the UK who specializes in intersection traffic engineering and stuff like that. They are fully aware of the type of vehicle that is used in Bermuda, whether it be fire engines or 40-foot containers or whatever, to ensure that they fits within the turning radius and stuff like that. So it's not something which is just we got to do something and be seen doing something. What do we do? A fair amount of consideration goes into this.
Yeah, part of the planning process initially started, as I said, with doing the surveys of understanding what traffic was there. The city was then modeled, a traffic model was made, and we went through iterative processes of, what if we made this change? What if we made this change? Will we get more vehicles through if we do this? What if we do this? How does this affect congestion? Well, if we improve this, where are the pinch points? Where do we need to get more traffic through, and what's causing the problems? I mean, all this analysis goes on, and we're looking at the city as a whole, not just one intersection. And understanding that we have approximately 18 traffic light intersections within the city, and we've gone through and replaced maybe 6 or 7 out of those so far. So we're not even halfway through the program of improving all those intersections to get all the improvements that we want. One of the programs which we're starting this year and have been working on is a SCOOT project. I won't tell you what the acronym means, but basically it's an intelligent traffic light system which has artificial intelligence. It learns from the traffic that moves through the intersection to how to optimize the light timings. So do I extend this green time? Do I cut it off? How do I get more vehicles through the whole network? So that's a program we're going to be running out in the next year. You'll start to see it on the ground. You'll see that we've cut traffic detector loops on the other side of the intersection. People go, why are you putting in traffic loops on the exit lane to an intersection? And it's purely, it's to be able to record the data of what's got through the intersection, to understand, to let the computer do its algorithms and figure out how to optimize that set of lights.
That'll be pretty cool. Anything that we can use technology to make things better for us would be that's awesome. Not on the technology side, but I know there's been a call for a homeless center, shelter to help those less fortunate than us. And in the city, we've seen like this year, we've seen 3 well-known homeless men pass away. What do you see as the need for a homeless center and shelter, and how much of a problem has homelessness grown in the city over the last 4 or 5 years?
I don't know about the last 4 or 5 years. It certainly has grown, that without a question. What the needs are for these homeless people, I don't know, and nor does anybody really within the corporation know. And here I really have 100% have got to say, we have a Department of Health, we have a government ministry which is specifically set aside for addressing these particular issues. We are not in a position to duplicate those services or to come into any way that we could be able to even come close to duplicating those services without expending a huge chunk of money on the issue. It would be much more efficient for us. We've said to our minister that we would be, or ministers over the years, that we would be very happy to do whatever we can to assist that ministry in terms of addressing this issue. But it really has to come from government itself. Every single ministry is within its own silo. For us to come as an external junior partner into the equation and try to bring things together, to set out the processes and all that stuff to identify the properties, realistically we would get absolutely nowhere. But we know that it's having an impact on the city. We know that it's having not only, do you have the social impact that it's having on the individuals, you also have the social impact on the people that are having to experience these individuals, whether it just be somebody that you're walking by on a daily basis, or maybe you're the person who has to clean up all the, excuse my language, but all the crap that they literally leave behind. And the property owner or the resident that has this on their front doorstep, that has a cost, and we'd like to try to take that away. But as I said, this is a project that has to be led by government. We'd be happy to be behind, to do what we can, whether it's using a property which is within the city, or helping them to identify a property, and doing what we can to assist with the restoration and whatever. We actually had that with the property escapes me right now. It used to be Board of Education many years ago on the way out of Hamilton at the end of Cedar Avenue. It's right on the edge of the city property.
Chusser House?
Yeah, Chusser House, yeah. We identified that a number of years ago as a place that we would love to, on a peppercorn rent, take over from government to restore properly. That was before the fire. Mind you, even after the fire, the structure is still standing there. It might be a hell of a lot more expensive to restore that now.
And for people who don't know where that is, it's up by the tennis stadium.
Yeah. The Salvation Army gave us a proposal in terms of how they could run it for us. That's probably about 9 years ago, and unfortunately went nowhere. But that's kind of, and realistically also where something like that we could fit within that, and to help address that.
I know on the back of City Hall over there at the corner of Victoria Hall, there's a homeless man that appears to be living there, and I was taking a group of students past there, and they're trying to teach them compassion because of the smell. I mean, if you walked by that corner, it's
it's awful. It's awful. Yeah.
But you're trying to explain, show some, it's inconvenient to you walking by, but here's somebody that's having to live like this every day. For you, it's an inconvenience of 5-10 seconds.
Yeah.
On social media recently, there's been photos of rats in the city, and maybe hanging around garbage that hasn't been picked up. No, you haven't seen any of it?
I've seen some pictures of rats. I operate a store in the middle of the Bermuda's International Airport. That has a rat issue as well. Unfortunately, island-wide, you've gone from a system that used to pick up the trash twice a day. I was getting confused with the city. We're picking up the trash twice a week to once a week, and that is going to have an impact island-wide, whatever you do. Our service, we are out there, I would almost say constantly, because anytime I go out walking around the city, there's one of our trash trucks picking up stuff. But they are definitely out there a couple of days a week. You may have noticed an increase in the number of bins that we have out there, which are available to every single property owner within or business ratepayer within the city, that they get, correct me if I'm wrong, they get the first one free.
Correct.
If they lose it or whatever, then they need to replace it. But it will have the name of their company embraced on the side. Embossed on the side. It is a good heavy lid, which is pretty difficult for one of them rats, regardless of whether they look like your pet dog or something, to open up. We're doing that. What we are asking, though, is for people to use these things responsibly. We do have issues in terms of when grease is put out. There are particular dates, and restaurants are fully aware of these things, because we have a gentleman that goes around on a regular route in terms of inspecting grease traps and stuff like that. I mean, grease is a form of fat, and rats will eat that as much as they eat your hamburger. They don't care that much. We need to ensure that things like that are being disposed of properly. And again, our trash bins are what better offer could you have than to say the first one's free?
Dealing with trash and things, as far as sewage system in the city, is that being evaluated, looked at, and ways to make that better and improved?
Certainly, we have been for years been looking at various ways to improve the treatment of our sewage, which leaves Hamilton to go to the outfall. We're in the process of looking at a design right now, and hopefully we'll have something more to say on this in the next few months, as the design we're going through a conceptual design to see exactly what we can do.
Right. And it is not, as has been publicly quoted by one of the ministers, it is not putting in another pump station. It is a system whereby we are taking out virtually all of the solids from the liquid, and what you're ending up with is something which is virtually colorless. It's kind of like a watered down ginger beer, if anything, in terms of coloration. And
you know a little bit about ginger beer.
I do know a lot about ginger beer, and I know not to confuse the two. While government has a process or has a scheme that they are working on in terms of connecting every single I guess, building a unit to a island-wide sewage system. Something like that is of a significant magnitude. It's going to be extremely costly. It's going to take many, many years for them to develop this. In the meantime, we have the financing in place to be able to handle this, willing to take the number one source of sewage and take all the solids out, and to get to a position you're not going to be getting grease balls, you're not going to be getting any of the particular issues that have risen up so far. This is a process that you need to go through in order to end up where they would like the sewage to be, ending up like, which is a sort of tertiary water, which is which could be used. So clean and clear that you would be able to actually drink it, and wouldn't have any impact on you at all. But the only way you can get to that level is start at the beginning and get all the solids out, and that's what we're proposing.
And again, with the grease balls, again, that's, been an issue in the beaches in the summer. Part of the reason why you're collecting the grease from the restaurants and various businesses, so it doesn't go in there in the first place.
I mean, just to go talk about the grease balls for just a quick second, the city hired a inspector to go around and inspect grease traps, and we probably did that about 4 years ago, and it was at the same time as we put out a fats, oils and grease policy, which the government actually then legislated. They took it a step further and legislated our policy. In the 4 years, we've had one incidence of grease ball in 4 years. So there's been a good public education piece. Restaurants and other kitchen users have been collecting their grease in a much better standard, and we have curtailed the grease ball issue quite a lot by taking that bit of fat out of the waste stream. And that's the best way to deal with things, is to deal with it at source, not try to have to remove it from a mixed bag. Right. It's just like sorting garbage. It's much easier to put it in the right bin to start with than to dig through and try and sort it up afterwards.
We talked about this briefly a little bit earlier. The pay gates at the various car parks around the city now, it's been in place for several years. Sort of like the hysteria from the original, people proclaim, $81 to pay for park for 4 hours. Well, that's, wasn't the intent of the system. It was to help move cars in and out, so people, if they wanted to park, they could find a place to park. How do you think that, now that it's been in place, how do you feel like it's worked?
It works extremely well. We have virtually recovered the lost revenue that we had lost in the first place, and unfortunately, because we were not able to go through a system such as the
clamping.
The clamping. Thank you. That we had to go to somewhere which unfortunately has had an impact on absolutely everybody. And the nice thing about the clamping is we would not be in the business, we would not see this as being a revenue stream for us. I think when we actually had the clamping running for an entire year, I think the revenue we were getting from that was less than $100,000 a year. But our car park revenue was around about 4 or 5 million. You get the clamping was decided to be against the Constitution. Our revenue from parking immediately dropped by $1 to $2 million a year. So that just shows you what the intent of the clamping was just do what you should be doing, and then you won't have to worry about this. And unfortunately, we've had to...
Actually, Mr. Mayor, just to correct you, the clamping wasn't found to be unconstitutional. It was the legislation wasn't...
that's right, yes.
The legislation wasn't put out properly, therefore wasn't enforceable. It is okay to clamp, because you'll notice that there is clamping at the airport and a few other places. You will find clamping on the island.
Any more expansion to the system, or what car parks don't have it anymore?
Well, we're looking at King Street. we are advertising in the paper right now for RFP for somebody to install the system, and then the next one will be on Reed Street Extension, the car park there. That one is a little bit more complicated. We'd love to do something with E.F. Gordon, because that is having a huge impact on the businesses in that area, where people from administrative buildings in the area just coming in there first thing in the morning and then parking there all day, and without the fear of there being any implications to their parking there all day. But that is such a convoluted little car park that would be extremely difficult for us to do, and at the same time to have that really pay for itself. We are hoping, we're working with the police force in terms of the traffic wardens, so we're looking at certainly getting that better policed than it has been in recent years.
You brought up the traffic wardens, and it seems like some areas of the city get targeted more often than others, and some get ignored, and then people would feel like they can park on the street for every day, and they're not worried about getting enough tickets over the course of the year to go into a car park. What can be done to make that more equitable and fair?
Well, I guess all I can say right now is that we are fully aware of that, and we wish to correct that. We are also receiving a lot of pressure from residents in North Hamilton who have a residence permit but are unable to use the residential parking bays because somebody came in that morning and has parked there all day, and again without necessarily having the fear of a parking ticket being applied. So we are, as I said, working much more closely with the Bermuda Police Service on this, and we are looking at ways of addressing that, and hopefully, I would say, in the next, and this involves humans, and it involves jobs, and it involves whatever. And I'd just like to say that within the next year or so, that we should actually be able to find something which is going to work and have be to the benefit of the community.
You mentioned there are some complications with Reed Street Extension. What would those be?
Because we took away the street side parking on that little area of Queen Street from King onto to the boundary of the city, that you used to be able to park along both sides of that street, but that was taken away. I don't know how many years ago, before my time.
80s,
yeah. And then promises were made that some of the businesses could have some parking spots allocated to them for their customers in the parking lot. So when we have the barrier system, we need to also have that in mind of how are we going to be able to deal with those customers to allow them the ability to shop and without having to pay that additional amount for parking.
Another area, I guess, is HSBC being turned into Point House. When that gets finished, is there going to be any different configuration to All Boys Point, or how will that affect it, or is this they're just using the space there and everything's going to be the same once it's fixed?
So Point House, the construction started, and what's happening there is the contractor D&J is going to be removing the whole facade of that building. It's being taken right down to just the bare columns and the floors. So it's going to be quite a different looking building, a much more attractive building when they're finished. But the answer to the parking is no, the parking is going to remain exactly as it is now. It's going to be reinstated. I believe there's an 18-month construction period for this project. So it is going to be pretty congested around there for the 18 months, and loss of sidewalks and loss of parking while this redevelopment happens.
But while it is happening, we've inherited, I guess, the HSBC sculpture from the front of the building, which we will be moving into All Boys Point, have that as as one of the focal points of the park, and we're looking at moving a number of the trees to give more open space, but at the same time having shaded areas and stuff like that. So we're looking at beautifying that area quite a bit.
I've always appreciated all the art that's around the city and the parks and things. So it's like, I know one of the students at Mount St. Agnes recently took some photos in Queen Elizabeth Park. I always have to stop myself before I say that. But really lovely, just taking photos of the various sculptures that were in the park. So it's a public service that's being saved.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to wrap up here, 55 minutes in. Is there anything, Patrick, that you'd like to say in closing?
Not particularly. Just wish everybody a happy May 24th. Have a good, safe one, and thank you very much, Don.
Okay. And how will you spend May 24th?
I'm actually going away.
Okay.
I'm going on. I'm helping chaperone a under 16, under 18 rugby trip to Toronto this weekend.
Okay. Well, best of luck for the team. Hopefully, boys and girls.
Best of luck for you.
Yes.
And Mayor?
I would just like to sort of, I guess, jump on the May 24th theme. It's a great day for multiple events, whether it be the half marathon or going out and watching the dinghies or being a part of the parade, and just hope that everybody sort of counts to 10 or 20 or 30, whatever it does to just think of your neighbors and those that are about you, and make sure that everybody can enjoy the events throughout the day as much as you're enjoying them.
Great.
Yeah.
I appreciate having Mayor Charles Gosling and Patrick Cooper come and discuss some of the things that are happening in the city. Appreciate your time today. I know it's a busy 2 days before May 24th. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
Okay. Speaking of May 24th and live, Dennis, are you down at the finish line on Friday? Yep. So if you want to watch everyone finish the race on Friday, you can tune in to Burn News. We'll be live streaming people as they congratulate themselves or crawl to the finish line or whatever the case may be. And we hope you'll tune in on Friday. And for this afternoon, I'm Don Burgess, your host for Burn News News and Views. We're here at the House Bermuda, and we appreciate you tuning in. And as always, I hope you have a beautiful day, not only today, but through the holiday weekend. Thank you.